But yes, thank you. That was a great song. Um, Thank you, everybody. Um, Before we continue, let's have a prayer, and I will share a little few verses with you. Dear Jesus, we thank you so much for this Sabbath day and for the opportunity to be here to worship you. Please be among us as we share your word, as we read the verses, and help us to uh, understand the topic or be able to draw conclusion for our lives. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Peace. And there was a song a long time ago that was saying something in the, I don't know if it was Beatles or some other, that what the world needs most is, I didn't say peace, it was love. But nowadays we see that there is peace. So I was thinking, it's the beginning of the year. So even Jeff mentioned in the a reading for the offering about people making decisions in the beginning of the year. And when is a better time than the beginning of the year to make some decisions? But I always look things from the Bible perspective. And I wanted to see what was 2023 more different than the previous years. If you look through a prophetic perspective, do we see anything different? Are things getting better? Are they getting back to normal or not normal? Or the not normal increases? And that's what I wanted to look through today. And if we look at the news, or if we follow, uh, even if you don't want to follow, wherever you turn on your online news feeds, or I don't know if you still use paper newspapers, which I don't even know why people are still printing them until they arrive in the mail. It's already old news. But the things that we are familiar with from, I didn't put Matthew 24 because that's a very familiar verse, but these are the things that we know about. Earthquakes, that's from Turkey earlier last year. This is the war in Ukraine, is the other. Wars and rumors of wars continue. Unrest down on the left, we see police riots. Famine down to the right. And in the middle, all of these things eventually they lead to the picture in the middle, and that has become prevalent in almost all big cities, sometimes not too small, not too big, even in smaller cities. You see, people not having a place to live and living in tents, result of all these other things that are happening. And one of the words that kind of become more uh, common, you can see it in the news, even pandemonium. I mean, all of this unrest, even when you look at politics and politicians are trying to solve all the troubles in the world, and this is a short definition: wild and noisy disorder or confusion, uproar. People almost say it during the riots. And the thing is, these riots started in 2020, and I don't see, they have probably decreased, but they're still occurring. And not just riots, but robberies and things, people go into stores. And now I understand if uh, probably you've seen in the news that people go and rob stores to get food. But strangely enough, what we see in the news is they rob for clothes and expensive items like bags and purses, which don't really can give you food unless they planning to sell it and to buy food with it. Then okay, maybe that's a reasonable assumption. But um, still, in the Bible, we have something that is almost contrary to the Bible. Tells us that these things are going to happen, but then at the same times we have this promise of peace. And this is from John 14, where Jesus was trying to encourage his disciples. John 14, Verse 27 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." So even that we have this promise of all these troubles, still Jesus tells us not to be troubled. And how can not be troubled when there are troubles around you? I mean, it's almost like what kind of person is that is not going to be troubled when there are troubles around him? And still, that's what the promise is. And my question always has been, how can you have peace when there is always trouble? I mean, can you be at peace? Isn't that somehow illogical to stand in the middle of, I mean, not that you have to go and stand in the middle of a riot, but of course you're not going to go participate. But how can you have peace when all these things are happening? And what if you're one of these people on the receiving side of all these pictures? If there is famine in your country or in your state, if there is a war in your state, you cannot just have peace. And still, that's what Jesus tells us. That's what Jesus told his disciples. And not just that, but we also see that even that um, everything else is falling apart. The economy is also not in a good shape, and all of the knowledge people in the world that know about finance and things are also puzzled, and they are not seeing the end of all this. Um, People are talking now about the collapse of all collapses coming, and we know the reason for that is um, people that are supposed to control the banks, like Federal Reserve and central banks, actually did a disservice to all this banking industry, and now everything is falling apart, even with their best efforts that they're trying to reassure that everything is going to be fine. We see that it's not going to be fine because all of these distress in the financial uh, industry is transferring down to businesses, then transferring down to people that are working in those businesses, and then it's transferring down to the household, and then people end up on the street. Um, there was an article, very interesting, related to that. Is if you remember in the 2021 and 2022, there was this trend that they call it, that people are quietly quitting, or uh, said in another way, people didn't want to go back to work. Some people being afraid because of the pandemic was still present, although there was a vaccine. If people are worried, they could take the vaccine. Um, but nowadays, in 2023, it's another trend emerges. It's like not just the people don't want to go back to work, and companies are laying off a lot of people. Now the CEOs, the people that are owning these companies, they're quitting in record numbers. And in the little numbers down below, I'm sure you cannot see it because it's just a picture. It says American CEOs are leaving their posts in record numbers in 2023, according to research. Um, the firm that was doing the research found that more than 1,500 CEOs left their post in 2023, making the highest amount of departures of CEOs ever in history, departed and left. And some of them, of course, they are worried about the situation in the world, and uh, some are just don't want to deal with all this anymore. I mean, obviously, if they can quit and cash in, of course, let them do it. And there is a interesting passage, we've read it before, but I want us to read it again. And sometimes I wonder how many sermons you can do on the same quote or on the same passage from the Bible. And I believe with this one, we're going to be coming back often because it's a very interesting passage from the Testimonies to the Church of the writer Ellen White, volume 9. And that is the whole chapter. Um, it's the first chapter, practically, this paragraph 11. It's very interesting because it was hundreds of years ago, 100 years, a little more. And it's telling exactly, and you can see how many of these things start to get fulfilled. And now what we see is the crisis is not just it intensifies, but the crises around the world actually start to overlap now, and all of them start to occur at the same time. So here, what she says is we are living in the time of the end. The fast fulfilling signs of the times declare that the coming of Christ is near at hand. The days in which we live are solemn, are important. The Spirit of God is gradually but surely being withdrawn from the earth. Plagues and judgments are already falling upon the despisers of the grace of God. The calamities by land and sea, the unsettled state of society, the alarms of war are portentous. They forecast approaching events of the greatest magnitude. The agencies of evil are combining their forces and consolidating. They are strengthening for the last great crisis. Great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. And uh, I know that we see these things are happening, but now it becomes very clear that there are really agencies that are consolidating their powers. It's not just rich people. We are talking people that are in power, people that rule governments, politicians, organizations, world organizations that get together. They're even with best intentions that are trying to help the world. It almost seems like they are not trying to help the world. And this is becoming a little bit difficult to understand in our days. Are they really trying to help the world, or are they trying to help themselves? Because at that moment, you can't really tell, 2023, but I believe that's becoming more and more clear. And the passage continues, the condition of things in the world shows the troublous times are right upon us. The daily papers, and that's in the time when she wrote it, there were papers. Nowadays, you can say your daily news feed, your daily news feed on your favorite internet cloud service are full of indications of a terrible conflict in the near future. Bold robberies are of frequent occurrence, strikes are common, thefts and murders are committed on every hand. Men possessed of demons are taking the lives of men, women, and little children. Men have become infatuated with vice, and every species of evil prevails. And you can see that. I mean, thefts are now, it's okay. I mean, right, if it's below $1,000, it's okay. Go on. That's what the greeters tell you now. If you enter a store, I don't know if you need to know if that's valid, but in some states, it's really valid. And it's very interesting here in this passage, you could see that a man or a person that is in his right mind is not going to go and shoot a bunch of other people. So we can see here that these people are possessed by demons. A rational thinking person is not going to do that. I know that there are people that have some kind of mental issues, but I don't know if that's really the issue. What we see here is they really have to have someone else driving them to do this. And this is the third section. And the whole chapter is very interesting. You can just read it. Testimonies, Volume 9, Chapter 1. The condition of things in the world shows the troublous times. I think that's a repetition. Men have become, So what are it's very interesting. It's another article that shows up as the super rich preppers planning to save themselves from the apocalypse. And there is it's very huge proliferation of prepping nowadays. And people are loading on guns and loading on food and building shelters. And the rich people, they are not behind. I mean, they have all the money. And the beginning here of the article says tech billionaires are buying up luxurious bunkers and hiring military security to survive a societal collapse they helped create. But like everything else they do, it has unintended consequences. And now, for us reading the Bible, we should know better that no bunker is going to save you. If they think that people are not going to find them, and the people that build, even the article says that, if they think that the people that build those bunkers wouldn't know where to enter and where to exit, it seems like being so smart to become so rich, obviously they're losing the smartness along the way when they're thinking to survive in a certain way. There was an article about Mark Zuckerberg. As you know him, he's the owner of what was it, Facebook. Most of you probably have Facebook. Now it's a different name, Meta. Um, he's also started building it 10 years ago, and now he's almost done completing it in Hawaii. He have underground, and it's very interesting. He's has created passages underground, self-sustaining food. You can grow food underground with no sun. I don't know how they transfer electricity, how they do power, but obviously they know how to do these things. And even they had a swinging, I was reading, swinging bridges across the palm trees. So they're going to be running on top of the trees while the peasants out there, that we are all will be down there and not able, to do anything. They're going to be able to escape. I mean, I don't know what kind of science fictions are they reading, but to me, it seems like either they're losing their minds or something else is happening. Um, in the Bible, we know there is one of the passages in Luke 21, 25 to 28 says, there will be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars and on the earth distress of nations. With perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them from fear and the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. So, and this is one of the passages. There are others that tell that to lift up our heads when we see troubles come. And if you look at the years back, and I'm looking 2023, if you haven't lifted up your head up yet, you should start lifting it up. If you are falling into the qualities that the people in the world experience, perplexity and distress, I say you are not doing a good job, especially for us as Seventh-day Adventists, as we have been revealed the truths of what's going to happen. And I know it's very interesting to me that when I'm seeing it online, if you're listening to a sermon or anything and look through the comments down, there's always going to be someone that is going to say, yeah, these things have happened before. I'm seeing less of that for some reason in the recent years. People in the world that are not even looking at biblical things start to look at those things. So this is a good idea for us to start, lifting our heads and seeing that our salvation is coming very near. And if you think about it, why is so different now than ever in the history of the world? Because it's never been global. It's never been so global that things are falling apart everywhere. I mean, from history, countries have fallen into distress. In the old history, countries conquer other countries. But nowadays, it's not like that anymore. Everything is so interconnected, the financial system, the global markets. If someone starts, some big country that is part of all this starts falling apart, it transfers to everybody else. And now, for some reason, we are seeing that people are watching, or they call this black swan event, somewhere to happen something. It could be a war, it could be something happening somewhere, big company having an issue, and this transfers to the whole system, and everything falls apart. And it's almost like 2023 for me was the year that people are watching for this thing to happen, but it didn't happen. So hopefully, God is still holding the winds of heaven for the strifes. In 1 Thessalonians 5:3, we have, for when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. And we know the labor pains, we know in other verses, are mentioned, which are the troubles in the world are like labor pains. They increase slowly in the beginning. And that's why the passage that we read from the Testimonies, volume 9 says that, the time will speed up at the end, because we know how the pregnant woman's pains, they speed up at the end. At some point, there is no more, false alarms that they call it. No false alarm. Then the false alarm becomes closer, and then at some point, it's not a false alarm anymore, and we know that this time is going to come. Um, Still, the definition of peace, as we read, Jesus said, "Still, I give you peace, not like the world gives." Um, and the one of the definitions, shorter one here, is freedom from disturbance, tranquility. So, can you have this peace, which the world cannot give you, obviously, as we mentioned, and similar synonyms there are tranquility, calmness, restfulness, silence, soundness, soundlessness, hush, noiselessness, stillness, solitude, isolation, retirement, freedom from interference, and the opposite is noise, irritation. So everything that's happening on the world is really opposite of peace, but still we have the commission almost and promise that God can give us peace. The question becomes how can we do that? I mean, can we really have peace? And I've always wondered that what is the way to discover peace? And if you think about the world, um, they cannot provide this peace. It's so much you can see now everywhere. People are trying to meditate, and we are not talking about the biblical meditation, which is reading a passage, thinking on it, lifting up your thoughts to God. That's the biblical meditation. You're talking about emptying your mind from nothing. And what usually happens is you're almost like a self-hypnotizing yourself to not to think about problems. Like self-affirmation that they say, wake up in the morning, wake up in the morning and say, I'm happy, I'm successful, I'm rich. And outside explosions fall next to your door or riots and people are blowing something. I mean, is that the peace really that you're just avoiding the trouble and not dealing with the situations? I mean, I'm not sure if those people that are living in tents they do that. I mean, I'm not sure if they do that. They're really hypnotizing themselves. I mean, it's nice if you think that you're fine and you're well, just living in your tent on the street, but I don't think that's the way to deal with life. Matthew 10:34-36 says, another verse, which is a little bit disturbing among the promises of peace that Jesus gives us is, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword, for I am come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be those of his own household. Now you can see that Jesus really emphasizing that he's not going to bring peace, but he's going to bring a sword, which we know sword is using for cutting things, for division. And if it's going to be a valid verse even if you use the Bible as being the sword, even if you say God bring to the earth to bring the Bible. And nowadays, if you look at that, even mentioning the Bible or even mentioning God, it's creating a division. So it's happening. I mean, Jesus did not bring it. But if you look a little deeper and kind of look at the context, you will see that God is not just trying to separate people. He's trying to weed out the weeds from the chaff, the wheat from the weeds, and he's not really trying to make people divided, but he's trying to make people make a decision either for him or against him. And here we come with the passage that I kind of chose for showing something very interesting about peace. And this passage is in the three of the um, Gospels, but Mark is kind of sounds a little bit better to me. So Mark 4:35-41, it's about Jesus calming the storm. But to me, it's like I see something more than just Jesus trying to calm a storm and having power over creation and over the uh, all the things happening on the earth. And on the same day when evening had come, he said to them, let us cross over to the other side. Now, when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was, and other little boats were also with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And then I woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, Who can this be that even the wind and the sea obey him? So we know the story. And most of the people that preach on this story, they try to emphasize about the sea, how treacherous it was. The Gennesaret, it's a lake sea. It's below the sea level. It's way down 500-600 feet below the sea level. It's surrounded with mountains, east and west, and there are winds that coming from the mountains down, from the cold air coming down to the warm water and creating these turbulences, and the weather can change very fast. But to me, I see something different in this story. I see the peace be still message in a little bit different light. And you can see um, one of the passages says that Jesus was falling asleep because he was preaching all day. He was very tired. And as soon as he entered the boat and he found a soft place, he just laid down and fell asleep. I mean, I'm sure some of you probably have had these working long hours or traveling somewhere. I remember before when I was younger, traveling back and forth, going to Europe, and the flights are long. And it's like, especially when I'm coming back, one time it happened, I was just driving first from the town where my parents lived to the capital to take the plane, then switching a plane in Europe and coming to America. It was, I fell asleep in the plane that was over the Atlantic from Europe, usually from Germany to America, that I even don't remember. I don't remember when the plane landed. I mean, I do not remember. I was sleeping so much, and people are saying that there was turbulence and things like that. I mean, you could be so tired that you don't even remember how the plane landed. Maybe you remember how the plane took off, but that was it. So Jesus was having the same experience. I mean, he was so tired, he laid down and fell asleep instantly. But the interesting part is at the end of the story, when it's very interesting if you read the verses after he said, Peace be still. The disciples, obviously, they were fishermen. They were very afraid of what's happening on the sea. And that's kind of interesting. If you've taken a boat in a kind of stormy sea, you will know that as bigger the ship is, the less is affected by the waves. But those little boats, then fishing boats, were small. They can probably carry 10 to 12 people, not more, at the best. That's probably at best. They're shipping boats. They just catch fish and go back to the shore. So these waves were already filling up the boat. And it's very interesting that the disciples did not even realize that Jesus was asleep down there. I mean, they were so busy taking water out of the boat. But it's very interesting at the end, you will see that they were so afraid. So at the moment when they're starting to feel that they're going to die, they didn't remember Jesus. And they go to him, and because he's sleeping, they think he doesn't care. I don't think Jesus did not care. He was just so tired. But he wakes up, and look what it says here. Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And that's the kind of the most important part for me in the whole story, is that relationship between fear, faith, and peace. I mean, if you are afraid, you wouldn't have peace. But if you don't have faith, you're going to be afraid. So all the three things are really, really related, very closely related. So the interesting thing is you can see that they became feared again, but now from him. They became feared from Jesus. Before they were afraid from the storm. Now because he calms the storm, The verse says, they feared exceedingly and said to one another, who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obey him? So suddenly their fear from the storm turns into fear, and I hope this is a good fear, fear of the Lord, of the power and majesty that Jesus having. There are very interesting places in the Bible. I'm just only put a few for the sake of time, but Romans 10:17 relates also faith, and how faith really grows. So then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. And this is a popular verse that we usually use, how to grow our faith. Obviously, if you want to be not distressed of what's coming in 2024, whatever that is, if you want to be in peace, obviously you have to grow faith. And this is one of the ways. Hearing the word of God. Mark 11:22-24, it's a story where Jesus healed one child. No, that was the story with the fig tree. So Jesus answered and said to them, have faith in God, for assuredly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. Therefore I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you will have them. So again, you see, faith, when you look at it, and this is not really a story about faith, it's more about how faith relates to peace. If you want to have peace, obviously you have to grow your faith. And I believe they are really directly related. As your faith is growing, you're going to be less worried, you're going to be less afraid, and you will have more peace. Mark 9:23-24 is, Jesus said to him, that's the father who had a son that the disciples could not cure because he had this dumb spirits. He was not able to speak, but also he was throwing him into places, throwing him into the fire, and the disciples could not heal. And the father had really issue with faith. And Jesus said to him, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately, the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. And I think this is really applicable for us today. If you do not believe, if there is something happening in your life nowadays, and this could happen now, we are seeing things are changing so fast. It could happen at any moment, any distress. I mean, we don't even know. The banks may close out tomorrow, and we won't be able to pay mortgage or rent or food or anything. Is to tell the Lord, I believe, but still, if it's not enough, help my unbelief. And that's what Jesus thinks. Jesus told him, just believe. Just believe. Don't doubt, practically, he told him. Matthew 13:57-58, Jesus said to them, and this is, I took it from the story, when Jesus went to his own town of Nazareth, where he grew up, not Bethlehem, where he was born. And he said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country and in his own house. Now he did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. So that's what he says to his disciples when he went through the town, and he did not do many healings like in other towns. It's very interesting, and this is it even needs his own story to research. But all the other cities where Jesus went, we know that he healed everybody. He healed all their diseases. Practically, there was no one left that had any disease. But in Nazareth, he did not do that. And that's the reason. He did not do many mighty works. Obviously, he did some, but he did not heal all of them. Why? Because they didn't have faith. They did not believe. So this is from Desire of Ages. It gives us a little bit more insight of what was the relationship of Jesus with his Father when he was on the boat, and why he was able to sleep through all this storm. I mean, I'm not even sure how he can sleep. I mean, you could be tired, but still in the kind of far away in your sleep, you should be able to hear this thunder and this shaking in the boat. So you see here, it's a very interesting passage. We will end up with it. When Jesus was awakened to meet the storm, he was in perfect peace. I mean, imagine It's a storm. Everything is shaking. And don't think that he was under a canopy or something, so he wasn't feeling the drips of water or anything. There was no trace of fear in word or look, for no fear was in his heart. Again, we see relationship between fear and peace. So he didn't have any fear. But he rested not in the possessions of almighty power. It was not as the master of earth and sea and sky that he reposed in quiet. That power he had laid down. And he says, I can of mine own self do nothing. John 5:30. He trusted in the Father's might. It was in faith in God's love and care that Jesus rested. And the power of that word which stilled the storm was the power of God. So Jesus laid down his earthly powers. Now it's the confusion sometimes that I believe preachers make it that Jesus had this power in him, obviously we know, but when he came on earth, this passage here tells us that he laid it down. He wasn't doing it on his own. It's not because he was God. He jumped up and says, please be still. Come on, storm. Boom, everything, clear sky, moon, sea, stars. No, here it says that it was doing that through the power of his Father, of God the Father. So he was resting in the presence of God the Father. And the passage continues, as Jesus rested by faith in the Father's care, so we are to rest in the care of our Savior. If the disciples had trusted in him, they would have been kept in peace. Their fear in the time of danger revealed their unbelief. In their efforts to save themselves, they forgot Jesus. And it was only when, in despair of self-dependence, they turned to him that he would give them help. And this is a lot. I mean, you can unpack a lot into this, just 2-3 sentences. Again, we see fear and peace connected and unbelief. So their faith wasn't strong enough. I mean, can you judge them in a sense? Yes, they've been with Jesus, they've seen miracles, but still, they're still growing their faith. And I believe that's the time that we should use now to grow our faith in these little situations. You're losing your job, or something happens, or someone is distressed, or some kind of sickness. Use your time to exercise your faith, to grow your faith, so when more troubles come, you can rest in God's peace. And that's what Jesus was doing. He was resting in God's peace. And this is the last. Sin has destroyed our peace. I mean, obviously, that's obvious. While self is unsubdued, we can find no rest. So this is again going back to the previous. If they were continued trying to to paddle the boat and take the oar out, obviously the coming in of water was more than they can take out. While self is unsubdued, we can find no rest. The masterful passions of the heart, no human power can control. We are as helpless here as were the disciples to quiet the raging storm. But he who spoke peace to the billows of Galilee has spoken the word of peace for every soul. However fierce the tempest, those who turn to Jesus with the cry, Lord, save us, will find deliverance. His grace that reconciles the soul to God quiets the strife of human passion, and in his love the heart is at rest. So today, and I'm just trying to say that for the next year, 2024, at least for me, I have found that there is no turning back. I believe so. I mean, I'm not sure how you see the events, and I'm not saying that God may not decide to give us a little time of rest in between, some year of calm. But as we are seeing, things are going to be progressing. So if you want to grow in peace, you have to grow in faith. If you want to grow, not to have fear, you still have to grow your faith in the one who can actually bring peace. And that's my desire for all of us. Amen. And we'll have our final song, and then we'll finish.
Will you stand with us as we sing our closing song, page